Okay, and we're live. Gonna start Halloween off with COVID, pre-COVID conditions, and the apparition that my friend and I caught on camera. Um, this one, this entity is something that. If you've watched the Dead Files, you might have heard her speak about this, but we caught it on camera and he was terrified and released it. But going through the housing project and the whole works drug health around here just got ridiculous. It's very mystery censorship society. And one thing I didn't know about my friend, and he had finally told me it was in his past, and it wasn't, was he had had a meth problem. And friends from youth getting homeless and that were trying to take advantage of his house. I didn't know uh, much of that, and but I would show up and cook and try to get him to study the Bible with me and um, just encourage him, trying to bring him out of depression. And if you've known anybody on that stuff, that's just not a depression that, that you're going to be able to encourage somebody out of. Uh, but while I did not know his situation, I was under the gun with all the targeted individuals brought in because this was released through the pain clinics, the whole TI business, targeted individual business. But um, I know he had spare rooms, and I've known him. We went to school together. He's much more like a brother. And I could pray in that house. And he would come up out of bed and come downstairs and say, "What are you doing?" And I'd say, "I'm just praying." And I'd be looking through movies and stuff, uh, downloading movies onto a memory. And he would get upset. Well, come to find out that I was praying because I was aware that it was a bad spiritual sort of situation. And I may give a little bit of background about how I came about to uh, have such a thin veil, but that there was a spirit that was carrying my thoughts and whispering in his ears. And uh, yeah, he didn't want to admit it because the drugs were making him crazy, and he, was trying to ignore that the drugs were, a type of crazy. But I went back and across the street, and they really hit that neighborhood with this whole works philosophy. You just weren't worth anything. You didn't have any values unless you could work. And you weren't disabled because they hurt right here and they hurt right here and they still work. And the one across the street from him had, and this is Gigi, by the way, the one across the street from him had gotten really gung ho and was really drinking and spitting Kool-Aid. And he was all about being above everybody because he, had these values, this uh, work value. And I started to say ethic, but it's not work ethics. that's much more biblical thing. But what we saw, now, what had gone on in his house, I had seen things and I didn't want to disturb him. But where he was involved with these people stealing from him, and I know what this is like because my windows were broke. You could not keep the ones on their way going to their drug dealer and back from breaking in my house. And, being alone and separate, and then them knowing everybody that's on medicine, it goes and carries from the family. But he had cameras, and I had seen some things out of the corner of my eye that I didn't look straight at his camera until he wasn't looking. And I did see a really shiny, glossy, dark shadow of the shape of. Now I've lost that dog, my little Yorkie. And like I said, this is Gigi. She's a dumpster dog. She's the best kind. She's the most problematic dog I've ever had. They can't all be smart, but she's sweet. Um, and also across his television, which now there I'm fairly certain was some techno garbage going on. And that's the problem. This technology does use ley lines, and it is using all the past we want to call, MK Ultra targeting. And that this is just the whole industry now. It's a neuro industry now. But when I went back to check on him, or try to get him motivated, clean his house or whatever, he showed me the video, and I told him before. Did he tell me he didn't know what to do? And he was a little leery of it. But now the camera shot straight out the window to the other building, and you can see it was red brick, all but for probably less than 2 foot of the cinder block at the bottom. And the camera's just set, and you see the side of this building, and there's no window, and very clear shot. And there's nice sidewalks and really nice tall parking lot lamps. Well, you could see down the sidewalk, here comes somebody walking. And you think, that head's too round. You look again, and you think, wait a minute. And it was cloudy, okay? Total black, darker than all the other colors in the darkness that gave things a black and white cast anyway. But this was like blacker than any black that was out there. And then you think, well, wait a minute. Okay, so it's just something obscuring the head. But it was a round cloud just over the head. And then you looked, and the body of it, the wrists and the ankles, and then you look at the stomach. You think, what is this? What's he wearing? And he's not wearing anything, but his body looks like clothes, almost a bell bottom, and it goes straight from his ankles into his foot, and the same way on the wrists. Well, and it just walks so casually, just like you'd expect somebody walking through the neighborhood, and just had his hands in his pockets and sauntered along, and then stopped and looked dead over at the camera, and that straightened up like that, and stopped, and then looked to the left, looked to the right. Well, we looked one way and then the other. I don't remember which was which. But he looked up the hill, and then he looked back behind him and looked at the camera again, and suddenly did a side-to-side maneuver that just blurred the whole thing out. But his head got a little more round that you could see, and it was light where his body was very, very dark. His face had this white camouflage or cloudy sort of cover to it. And suddenly that shape started getting smaller and smaller right there at the sidewalk till it was the shadow of a really big black cat. And it darted to that section that was in the cinder block, and went from one corner of the cinder block foundation to the other, and back and forth until it got right in the center and shot up underneath that building. And a few seconds later, you see that it comes out, and again, you have the same play back and forth. I'm telling you, this dog needs Ritalin. It does not stop. She has to have something in her mouth, a toy, a pacifier the whole time. But the shape then again morphed from a cat into this full-size man, and you could see its head was much more round, at this time, and it looked dead even longer at the camera, and showed more character in its body language. And then it was like, "Huh, showed you," and just walked. I mean, if you could imagine somebody, coming through the neighborhood looking for something to mess around and get into, that's what this showed. And the guy was really occultically into the whole work value priority, say all the right things uh, system. So I remembered the dead files where she had gone into a portal situation, and there were lots of things going on in this neighborhood by this point. Um, like I said, I'd seen on the camera the night before, if you could have taken my little Yorkie and made it stand up straight and walk and about 4 foot tall, the shiny shadow was sitting on the roof of the car, from his monitor. Um, but that's my Jack Leonard story, and it was COVID related. But as far as these things that I've come up against, I've seen some high ranking ones, and I consider that to be probably one of the most. I think that you see that in the Halloween cartoon in Jack. But there was also kind of beginning, I started getting a lot of notification that demanded I go here and demand, and I was for jury selection and had to go to a different county, and none of this stuff was possible, and I shouldn't have even been on the list. And I had to be in court in the next town. And I remember I set out about 3 o'clock, and I had to walk. It's a 10-minute drive. So, I don't know how many tens of miles that I walked through the night. And I saw something that I knew was very high ranking, and searched for anything like that. And to me, this was the mule. This was, when you look in your Bible, it talks about the mules of the fathers that made the kings have a certain type of prophecy when they would go looking for their father's mules. And of course, Cain's, I think it was Lamech, also found his father's mules. And you get into some ancient things referred to biblically. But this, I had only seen a picture of. I really liked the Jim Henson production of The Dark Crystal and The Labyrinth. And the guy that did the artwork on The Labyrinth, I just thought, there's so many things that you see images of. I'd like to see if there's some kind of imagery that has gone back in history, and had realized how the idolas of society reflected in our media. You can find these archetypes, and somehow I just was going through those art pieces. Well, this wasn't in the movie, but when you look at his artwork, one of the characters that he had done was exactly, I mean, breathtakingly what I saw. But comes across, it's an older highway, and they have those small concrete overpasses, and the real thick concrete with a little bitty, probably 2 foot archways, and the little section you can walk by. And as I approached this, there were sounds like, okay, that's a deer, because you could hear the graveling sound and a piece of slate conk, conk, conk falling. And I said, well, that's probably deer. Surely. Well, then it was like, no, I'm hearing too much, and there's echoing down there in the valley that's going underneath that bridge. I want to quick get by here because they could be down there, using that creek, which I'd run into before. They were making meth by keeping it cold, which you don't know that when you're in the situation. You just know that you're not wanted. There's a lot of threatening silence. But I had learned that. So I thought, I don't, they're at least partying or something down there. So when I got on the bridge, I got a couple car lengths in, and just this side of like the center of the bridge, right out of that little archway, came this massive, and it's smaller in the back, black shadow, alive and darker than dark. And it just came right up and came to the top of that bridge and turned, and its eyebrows, now it didn't have eyes. Its eyebrows came down like a mean, menacing, burl right here. And, kind of did a threatening charge at me. And beneath the brow, it was just blacker than black. No eye socket, no anything, just even darker than the darker shadow that it was. And of course, it charged me, and I told it to leave in the name of Jesus. And it took a couple steps back and then turned to charge me again. And I told it to leave in the name of Jesus. And it didn't like it, and it went on. My son and I saw, which I'd heard in Berea for a very long time, that the farmers were reporting seeing these things, and I didn't know what they were. They say things, you think something real, you don't know. And my friend wanted to work tobacco, heard about it, and then wanted to go work somewhere else so she could find out what they knew. And she was trying to get around where she could see one of these things. And these are the ones that you see on all the paranormal shows that have perfectly circled red lights for eyes. And after hearing about that, I really still did not know I was hearing supernatural stories, how they would get out in the road and just disappear and be in the field. That's really the most I remember having heard about it. But my husband at the time and I had looked for this house, and it was really odd because they put the two driveways butt up against each other. The way they had sectioned this off private, it had been a rural property that someone, personally split up and sold off. And we stopped in there and talked to the guy, and we just had a nice little visit. And the guy was going to sell us this big 2-story home for like $21,000. And we walked around, we went upstairs, and he had it built so odd. When you walked up the steps, you just walked onto a hallway platform that went across the other side of the hallway and made the rectangle, which you've probably seen in some of the castles that Hitler went looking for these places at. But you had that open balcony. And as soon as my head came up above the floor, I knew something had been there and walked and moved and where it had gone, and that it lingered. It was so a part of its path. And of course, I didn't tell other people, but my husband, I would tell. And he told the guy, he said, she's always right. So I'm just gonna go ahead and ask you. And the guy said, yeah, the stories were that it came from the creek bed. Well, on this particular night, and it was actually through our divorce, my son and I were driving from Corbin to Berea, Kentucky. And there's where Renfro Valley was at. These things cross at the curve, next to the last curve before you get to the Berea exit. So it's just before you come up upon that barn that has Mount Vernon or Renfro Valley, I think is what it says on the tin rooftop used to. So that's where they used to do all the country singers would come. But and so they did do some biblical stuff there. But we were driving, and there's an old road torn down, and the only thing left of it is an underpass. It's not there now. They finally tore it down That underpass was sitting out there and it just, empty. You could see the road went under it, but I didn't even know I was passing that same road of that house we looked at. And I looked down there, and on the edge of the horizon before it disappeared into the wood line, I saw two red lights. And I said, and I saw them do this. And I said, "Oh, that's somebody down there drunk on a bicycle." I said, "They've just wrecked." About the time I said that, those red lights, if you'd taken a laser and went like that, came in front of the car and stopped on the side of the road. And the second one behind him from the other side came and was standing beside him. And those four big circles of light looked in on us, looked at each other, and then looked back at us. And my son just started tearing up the dashboard. And he was so mad at me because as soon as I saw that thing, the speed it was coming, I took my foot off the gas because I could tell, okay, this is not a real thing. And if I keep going, this car is not going to matter to it. I could look up to tell my son something, and it's going to be sitting between us. So I just took my foot off the thing so that I didn't intersect with it. Come here. Come here. She throws her feet if you're not looking at her, letting her bite you. Quit whining. So he's yelling at me for taking my foot off the gas. And he about that time then, the one went right back in front of the car. Like how that I could keep from hitting it, I have no idea. And the other one back the way that it went. Now, as far as the situation that was going on then, there wasn't a lot of honesty between, or for my husband to me, and he was running around and stuff, and he wasn't doing his job very honestly either. And don't really know, because now I had some college friends up there, and they had gotten into witchcraft and did a spell for invisibility, killing a dead cat that came out that they had done. And that was really wicked. Something that I got caught up in that I won't share here, but those are like permanent fixtures of belief systems and drug dealing that came out of North Carolina. And when you think of Burning Man and stuff, they come down and they have outdoor parties all Halloween night long. And they always end, I guess, with them all crumpled up with whoever, whatever seems to always be a part of that. But there was a spirit, there was a sound. Now, that sound I had heard once before, and there was a very untrustworthy individual in the sort of situation that we have that has a job, or let's just say gender identity educational jobs. And this person was not trustworthy. I mean, I thought, well, maybe they're just an insurance agent that, follows people. But to have seen put on wigs, in a car, and but I remembered because when this happened that I'd heard the sound of a really big person falling down the steps, and when we had our apartment in Berea, that began to occur continually. I was pregnant, and the building finally emptied out on either side, and he was so tore up about it that he went up through the attic access, and there was nothing dividing it in the attic, and went next door to prove somebody was in there and get them out of squatting in this building, and nobody was there. But there were a lot of other things. I probably shouldn't keep everybody's patience up. Let me think. Oh, well, high-ranking ones that I had seen astrally, and I've only seen, out in out-of-body situation. what you might call a Bigfoot, and also a man with a pointy hat head that was really, I would call a rainbow creature. And I saw other rainbow creatures. And of course, the classic alien abduction. Uh, so, um, so the supernatural is real. We are really spiritual beings, and denying it is ridiculous. But they definitely, because you can't, when you talk about this type of MK Ultra, this technical use of it, most people's minds are not going to be able to wrestle with their own impurity in front of these beings, and even your mind operate. But you can't stand on your own worthiness, because that's not going to happen. Just the nature of the relationship. And I mean, their suggestion is just to ignore the entity. And there's certain things that you can invite and stay in a loop in your life. And, scar over the conscience and that sort of thing, and be used like an asset. So anyway, I would say happy Halloween, but I think Halloween is a cautionary tale, and it is based on these things. And the last thing that you want to do is get into a bartering situation. Know when you need to be corrected, and not by everybody around you, not the group, and not everybody's worldview. The only authority are in ranks, one over you, one over you, one over you. But when it comes to this stuff, Jesus is the head ranking, and the last of the supernatural to come live and die like a man was Jesus, and he is the judge. And what a good thing he is, so that you don't have to be judged, and you don't have to understand all this stuff, and you don't have to go through all this stuff. But if you're confronted with it, Jesus alone, and knowing that people like me have torn Bibles in half, turning them back and forth to explain these things in their own life, can tell you the Bible's telling you that. And that all these other alternative philosophies and other histories of the Christ conscience, came to a fulfillment in him. So, you do need to keep and continue, because if you're not correcting yourself, you can't receive even memory for the word. But you want to start getting into the knuckle joints, and how that mechanically, if it's what causes what. You have got to make legitimate, conscious, or I guess it's your consciousness, to always apply things to yourself first. And anyway, happy power over everything, Scooby Doo. That's it for Halloween. Huh. It's going to record me now. It's going to record me now. After I just sat at the table and did the show. After I just sat at the table and did the show. It's never worked this way before. Okay, well, if I'm live and I'm not a viewer, I can look down. Should I tell it over? Should I tell it over? What about that? I just quit recording and came over here and plugged this up. Now that's some spy business. Straight from YouTube. I just recorded a piece talking about some high-level entities that I had experienced. And this is not going to work as long as it's going in the background. So I'll have to tell you about the round-headed leotard man that shapeshifts into a cat, and the mule being. A future recording. And I'll check over there and see why it thinks this is a better show.